graduating college, my mother came to the graduation. She said, I've got great news. I'm coming to the graduation, but I also have some other news, no more checks. And I said, what do you mean? Because she'd been paying for college and my rent and everything. And she said, the dead bird under the nest never learns how to fly. I said, what the hell does that mean? She said, no more checks. I'm not writing any more checks. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. You know, I paid for your education, paid for your birth, the last day of college, we're done. And I thought, shit. I mean, because I really had no job or anything. And I had a tough couple of years. I mean, I couldn't even pay the rent, but it worked out and I got motivated. And, you know, obviously I'm pretty happy about the outcome. So when I had my first big liquidity event, when the learning company got sold, it got sold for about 4.2 billion. And there was 10 of us that were founders. So we woke up the next morning and said, shit, we're rich. Like, we didn't even think about it. We came back to work and kept going. But when I went over, that was in Cambridge, and I went over to Boston and saw the lawyers and said, look, I want to set up a trust that basically provides for my kids, because they were like 4 and 6 at the time. And it pays for everything for them until they finish college, and then they get nothing. And he said, what the hell is that? I said, well, it's a way that I can provide for them to set them up in life, but not entitle them. I was taking a cue from my mother's strategy, same idea. And I went home that day and I told my wife I was going to do this. And I sat down with my 2 kids and I said, here's how this trust works. And everything's good until, even if I get run over by a truck, you're good till you finish college. And they went, yeah, that's great, Dad. You know, didn't give a shit about it. They were 4 and 6. So
I can't believe you sat your 4 and 6-year-old.
But I had to disclose what I'd done. Years later, we're still in Boston, and my son is doing really poorly in high school. He is sucking and just not applying himself, and you know, his marks are terrible. And the way to look at high school is it's just like a test to get into college. You gotta pass a few things. So one day he says to me, I'll never forget this conversation. Lynn and I were going out to a movie that night, and he says, hey, Dad, one of my friends was telling me about his trust fund. And what does my trust fund look like? And I said, well, I don't know about your friend's fund, but here's how yours works. If Mom and I get run over by a truck, you're good until you finish high school, because it doesn't look like you're going to college. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the trust only pays till you finish college. Then it's done. He says, what do you mean it's done? I said, it means no more checks. And I said to him, the dead bird under the nest never learns how to fly. And he said, what the fuck does that mean? And I said, what it means is you should start thinking about taking advantage of this now, because you're not, and you're not, I don't know what's going to happen to you. You're not even going to finish high school here. And I think at that moment that the lesson of life, you know, given to me by my mother, he saw the abyss. He saw the darkness. He saw the situation he was in and went, shit, this is bad. And so he knuckled down and he started getting into in what he was into. And he eventually became an electrical engineer. And he was at the top of his class all through, you know, college and right into engineering. And in all these electrical engineering cohorts, they all build a combustion F1 race car and an electric one. And they race them all around the world against each other, because that's how they're learning. If they're interested in electrical engineering, you're building that F1 Formula car. And every year, MIT would win, and because they always built the best car. Well, in Trevor's case, he became the captain of the team, and he worked on the software that released the energy out of the battery in a different way, and he beat MIT. And so the Tesla guys came over and said, who are you guys? And he went to college in McGill. He said, we're the McGill team. And he said, you're all hired at Tesla, all of you, the whole team. Wow. That's where he works. That's where he lives, in San Francisco.
Wow.
So
that's cool.
That's the lesson of the dead bird right there.
Yeah. Applicable advice too. I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Because you can take care of them in health issues, but if you guarantee them a free ride and they never have to take any risks, they won't. Yeah. And you'll destroy their lives. It's the worst curse you could do. Yep. Everybody knows people that have really screwed up rich kids. And they made that mistake. They just made it too easy for them. It's not going to happen in my family. And my trust goes, you know, in multi-generations. When he has kids, even if they're not married, it takes care of them till right at the end of college.
Yeah, I think, you know, I got this huge benefit of joining Dragon's Den when I was 28 years old. I was so young. And so a lot of people are like, well, how do you make more entrepreneurs? Because entrepreneurs are really important for economies. They're very important for societies. They build the best world that we want to live in. They have the most efficient way of solving problems for the most part. So I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, how do you do this? And so people are like, well, can you teach courses? Can you do this? And like, you can do some of that. But if you really want to build more entrepreneurs, you have to solve the problem of entrepreneurs cannot get enough access to capital. And so it was really like I started thinking about legacy at that point, and that was the real impetus behind Clearco, is that, if you are, and look, my business doesn't cater to real estate businesses, it's for e-commerce businesses because it was the space I understood. But if you're building an e-commerce company, your options before we existed were go to a bank and put your house on the line and put up a personal guarantee to get bank financing, or go to a venture investor, which was really available to maybe 5% of founders.
Right.
Because for the most part, VCs hate e-commerce. They don't want to invest in that space to begin with. And second off, you can't even get into the VC space if you didn't go to the right school and know the right people. And it's just a very elitist network that you really have to drill yourself into. Like, no VCs talked to me until I was 8 years into my career and sold a company for millions of dollars. Like, that is when that group of people started taking me seriously. And so the whole idea behind Clearco was we should be able to have you come, you plug in your data, we can give you capital on a rev share basis, so we're not taking a personal guarantee in your house, and we're not taking equity in your business, and we'll get paid back our capital plus a fixed fee on top of that. And then you start thinking about, okay, if this can make a really big impact. And I think we have made a pretty extraordinary, we've invested more than $5 billion in 10,000 different founders in 13 countries around the world.
Wow.
Like, the scale of that is
Say that again.
more than $5 billion.
Holy cow.
US dollars, real dollars. So, like, you think about things like this, our business model has been copied in 45 countries around the world now, which I think is extraordinary because it gives founders a better way to fund their business. And it was all started at like my condo 8 years ago, which is pretty crazy. So I think about that legacy and the ability for us to be able to build and create more founders, and me to be a small part of either personally investing in them through Clearco, investing in them through Dragon's Den. And I still think that's the best way to make impact. I mean, I've certainly thought and been asked to go into government. I've certainly thought about other private sector roles. I just think that, and I'm literally talking to a group of entrepreneurs, if you want to make an impact for yourself and your community or your family, almost always the most efficient way to do that is becoming a founder, because you're the only person that holds yourself back.
I've always said this. If you're going to buy a house, this is what husbands and wives do. Honey, I think we should sell our house and move. I want to move to this neighborhood. Both of them get excited. No different than talking about a kitchen renovation, by the way. That, like, everything just boom, boom, let's do it, and hire the first person to get in and do the kitchen, right? What do? They go look at a few houses. They fall in love with a house. They got, 3 to 7 days? All right, now let's find a home inspector. That's years ago. Everyone was doing home inspections. Let's find a home inspector. Who do you expect to find at the last minute to inspect your home? Should you not find the best home inspector on the market and then go for a look at a house and bring him with you? Does that make sense to you? Because that sure makes sense to me. I can move this in another direction. Selling the home. Why don't you get a home inspection and put it on the table? So when I come in as a buyer, because you guys are buyers, right? I can see the report from the home inspector and make sure it's a good home inspector. Does that make sense?